Okay, let's begin. I'm going to start by asking you a couple of test questions just to establish a baseline.
We'll start with an easy one.
Caught out.
Exposed as a lie in the media.
So you are calling him a liar?
Well, you can pick the name.
This was saying black is white.
Now go ahead and say something that is true so we can properly calibrate the machine.
The Polygraph.
Joining me for Polygraph, Claire O'Neill. She speaks on justice for Bill Shorten's shadow cabinet. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Raf. How are you?
That kind of matches. She's also the ALP member for the seat of Hotham. And Darren Chester joins us, Minister for Infrastructure and Transport. He is, of course, Nationals MP for Gippsland. And all but one Nationals electorates across the country voted yes. Darren, how you going?
Well, great to be here on such a historic day.
I want to hear from the leaders of our political parties on their responses to the pretty significant yes vote.
We must respect the voice of the people. We asked them for their opinion and they have given it to us. It is unequivocal. It is our job now to get on with it. Get on with it and get this done.
It may have been 61% who voted yes in the survey, but I want to say to all LGBTIQ Australians, you are 100% loved, 100% valued, and after the next 2 weeks of Parliament, 100% able to marry the person you love.
That was the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and the Opposition Leader, Bill Shorten, if it wasn't clear from their voices. Claire O'Neill, how did you feel at 10 o'clock this morning?
Well, I was actually there with Bill Shorten at the State Library, and it was incredibly emotional because we were there with 1,000 or so people, and some of those people have been fighting for this for decades. And, you know, days like this are the reason I'm involved in politics, because it shows that we can make positive change. We can change people's lives. And what happened today is going to improve the lives of millions of Australians and their families. And I just couldn't be happier.
Darren Chester, how did you feel at 10 this morning?
I was relieved, actually, Raf. I was relieved in the sense that I was at an event as my ministerial responsibilities took me out to the Essendon airport today. And when I got the first text coming through of the overall number, I was very relieved. And then when I saw the Gippsland number, my own seat was very close to the national average, and then I realised that 15 out of 16 National Party seats, so regional seats where people were, I guess, sceptical about how the regional Australians may vote, that they'd voted strongly in favour of reform. I was relieved and excited by the thought that perhaps my regional constituents had actually proved the pundits wrong. I think people often get regional communities wrong. They don't really understand that we are perhaps more tolerant than people understand, perhaps don't understand how our communities have changed a lot. We've got a lot of younger people coming through our communities who have perhaps changed the dynamic of regional Australia. I was relieved and excited to see how the vote came out.
Was the survey worth the money and was it a worthwhile exercise?
I think the criticism of the survey around the money is a justifiable criticism. $122 million was the figure, and I think people could reasonably say that was a lot of money. But given that the Parliament, and I've been there now 9.5 years, had failed to resolve this issue through Labor governments and now through a coalition government, had been unable to resolve it within the halls of the Parliament, I thought giving the Australian people a chance to have their say was fair enough. It was a position we took to the election. I was surprised that Labor didn't allow for the original plebiscite to go through. I think the postal vote was the lesser of the two outcomes that I would have thought we should progress with. But, overwhelmingly, people were respectful, they were moderate, they were calm. There were outliers on both ends of the debate who I thought didn't cover themselves in glory with their comments, but the vast number of Australians are very decent, very fair-minded. They cast their vote and got on with their life. So, look, was it worth it? I think it's going to be a great step forward for Australia.
Claire, was the survey worthwhile if you get the popular endorsement for something that, you clearly believe in it? Does it help to have the popular endorsement?
Look, I don't... As you know, Raf, Labor didn't want to have a survey, and it's easy for us, three straight people, to sit down and talk about what a positive experience this has been. That's not the case for lots of LGBTIQ people. And let's remember that through this process, women like Penny Wong were told that their children were the new stolen generation. Like, that is a hurtful thing. That's not going to just disappear because we've got a yes vote. But I really think the focus today needs to be on what's a positive and an important thing. We can't change the process that's been set up by the Turnbull government. It's disappointing that they didn't do it through the Parliament, as we're already going to have to go back and do that anyway. But the main thing we should focus on today is that the majority of Australians gave an endorsement and said to LGBTIQ Australians, we've got your back, and that's the important thing here.
Look, 1300 222 774 is the phone number. You might have a comment or a question for Claire O'Neill and Darren Chester. Just on an issue of principle, I don't know if there is. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. If the nation votes yes, or your electorate votes yes or no, does an MP or senator have to follow what their constituents said in the survey, Claire?
Well, as everyone knows, the Parliament retains the power to change the law. And even though we've had a resounding yes vote today, we're going to have to go back to Canberra and do what we were always going to have to do, and that is make a vote on this. Every member of Parliament is going to have their own view about how they deal with the plebiscite. We had people like Erica Betts saying they don't care what the majority of Australians think. They're going to do what they want. In many cases, those same people were pushing for a plebiscite, so that was never really a very consistent argument.
But Jason Clare, I think, who's is Blaxland, isn't it? Western Sydney, 25% of the people in his electorate said yes.
Yeah.
So that means 75% said no. He's going to vote yes. Yeah. By what principle does he vote yes?
He votes yes on the principle that this is a fundamental human right, and a plebiscite was not the primary way of resolving it anyway. It was a very expensive opinion poll. Jason has, I've been a yes voter for a long time, but, in his electorate, people might have wanted him to vote no, but this is a core issue of ethics for him. So he's going to do what his heart's telling him is the right thing to do. And I think when it comes down to it, we don't have a political system where we put things to a plebiscite and the Parliament is just a matter of, going in and, yeah, exactly. I mean, we elect politicians as whole human beings, and we have to put some level of trust that they'll do the right thing, and that's what Jason's going to do.
Darren Chester, you're in a joint party room with a whole lot of people doing different things. I think people like Matt Canavan and Michael Sucre are going to follow their constituents. And I think people like Erica Betts and Kevin Andrews are not. What should the guiding principle be?
I think that's a really tough one, Raph. It's pretty easy for me. I mean, I came out about 3 years ago and said I'd changed my view and took it to the election, and people in my electorate knew that I was inclined to vote yes in a conscience vote, and I had an increase in my primary vote at the last election. So very easy for me. My electorate voted 60% yes, so I'm in easy street in terms of analysing the issue. Tough for people whose electorates have voted so strongly differently to their own personal view. And I have a lot of sympathy for my colleagues who are in that position, so I'm not going to seek to give them free advice on the issue. I was surprised by the vote in Western Sydney. It genuinely took me by surprise. I thought that the majority would be voting yes right across Australia.
Can I just explain that, actually? Because I think out of the top 10 seats that voted no, in terms of a difference between the no and the yes, 9 of those seats are Labor. I think that all of those seats are in Western Sydney. And as you pointed out, 15 of 16 National Party electorates voted yes. So what do we think, or can you draw a conclusion? So you've got the 2 seats in Victoria, Bruce and Corwell, Roxburgh Park, Springvale, places like that, Broadmeadows. They voted no. Western Sydney voted no. Can you draw a conclusion why they voted no?
Look, I think you'd have to overlay it with some cultural reasons, what communities perhaps are dominant in those areas. There may be some strong religious groupings in some of those electorates that you'd have to consider. I don't want to draw conclusions with only limited information. I mean, I often criticise some of my city colleagues for having such strong opinions about regional Australia when they know nothing about it. Western Sydney is a place that I honestly would go to less frequently than other parts of Australia, given my role. I was actually, ironically, I was there yesterday on a road safety issue, but I don't pretend to have enough detailed information about those communities. But what I have been, really impressed by is that out of the regional seats in the Parliament, those held by Labor, Liberal, Nats or Independents, there's about 45. 42 of them voted yes. So I think that's a really strong indication that regional Australia was prepared to embrace change. Perhaps surprised some of the pundits in that regard. Didn't surprise me at all in terms of, I got a sense of this about 5 years ago when I was at the Orbost High School, and I asked a bunch of Year 10 kids, this issue of same-sex marriage, what do you think about it? Now, Orbost is more than 3 hours from Melbourne. The strong timber community, strong farming community. Everyone would say that's a conservative community. In that room of 35 Year 10 kids, 34 said they'd vote yes. One said they'd vote no. And the young fellow said he'd vote no. He said, I don't have a really strong view. I probably would vote no myself. And I thought, this is 5 years ago, Year 10 students, they're probably 21 now. I wasn't surprised at all that Gippsland voted so strongly.
What's happening in Western Sydney, Claire? Or Bruce and Cornwall here?
Yeah,
the north?
I have to agree with Darren here. I don't think we know enough yet, and we need to understand a little bit more about that. But look, I think the important thing to focus on today is all the way from Gippsland to my electorate of Hotham, almost all of Victoria voted yes, and it's fantastic to see that great generosity of Australians being reflected in the vote today.
Oh, I love to see the two major parties agreeing in the studio. It's such a nice
I love you calling the National Party a major party, Raph.
Oh, well, you are.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're basically the same as the Liberals, aren't you, Darren?
And look, and
No.
I'm tempted sometimes to call the Greens a major party as well. I mean, once you've got a significant enough representation, and given the splintering you've got going on, especially in the upper house, I reckon you can chuck the Nats and the Greens in as a major party. Not that both of you will probably like it. But anyway, Jason is somewhere in southwest Victoria. What do you want to say, Jason?
G'day, Raph. It's I just wanted to take the opportunity. I'm midway through milking at the moment, but I just wondered whether Darren can remember me. I visited Parliament House a couple of years ago with a group of rural leaders, and he did the same thing in the Nationals party room. He asked 48 of us, rural leaders from northern Victoria, where I was at the time, who would vote for same-sex marriage, and he was the only one of the Nationals members in the room who voted for it at the time, but about 46 out of the 48 young rural leaders in that room voted for it. And at the end of the day, he handed me a card and said, it said, "I believe in you," or something similar. And I just wanted to say thank you, mate, because from there I've gone on and won National Young Farmer of the Year and helped being a bit of an advocate for young gay people in rural areas. And it's Christmas to me today, and I just wanted to thank you for giving me that confidence and spurred me on. Thank you very much.
Well, mate, I can hear the emotion in your voice, and I'm tearing up myself, mate. So thank you so much for taking the time to give us a call. And Wannon, the seat of Wannon, southwest Victoria, 61% vote in favour of same-sex marriage. So I think you've been vindicated in your advocacy work. And the point is, it's a question now of making sure we use this as a uniting moment in our communities. If 61 said yes, 39 said no. So we've got to make sure we reach out to people who had a different view and bring them along on this historic day to make sure we unite our regional communities. We've got other issues we need to deal with, which are equally problematic for us, and let's get everyone united behind those tough issues as well. So thanks so much for giving us a call.
Thanks, Jason. Then make sure you don't desert Red, okay? He'll get upset. I know you're a keen breakfast listener as well. He'll get upset if you switch allegiances. Jeff's got a point to make in Hastings. What did you want to say?
Yes, on the no vote, don't you think it's strange that from the analysis I've heard, that the Asian migrant community voted for
the no.
The same as for a no vote, the same as Pauline Hanson.
Well, interesting cleavages, interesting divides in society. You are right that it's a good time to point out, actually, Jeff, Bennelong, which I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying it's got about 20% Asian background, 15% English background, so there's more people with an Asian background than a British heritage in Bennelong. That just narrowly scraped in a no vote. Worth pointing that out, 1300 222 774. I think from my reading, the only strong correlation that you can really draw is religion. If you have an electorate where a high number of people don't claim to have a religious affiliation, you're much more likely to get a high yes vote. 1300 222 774 is the phone number. Let's talk about amendments. It's just started its path through the Senate. It'll take number of weeks to get through the House of Reps. I think this is right. Anybody can stand up with the private members bill and say, hey, I want this amendment. The poor old baker, Darren Chester, who doesn't want to make a cake for a gay wedding. James Patterson's withdrawn his legislation that would have backed that idea. Is that sort of amendment going to get up, do you think?
No.
You're pretty sure?
You asked me, do I think? I'm thinking, no, it won't get up.
Right, not enough support.
Well, I think it's crazy.
There are a fair few people in your joint party room who are pretty adamant on that. Matt Canavan's going to be joining us after 5. It's a matter of principle for people like him.
Well, that's fine for them. You asked me, did I think it would get up? I say no. I think it's a crazy idea. It shouldn't get up. It won't get up. It would be a massive step backwards. It would be going down the pathway of saying, well, we're not going to serve blacks in this pub, or we're not going to have Aboriginal people swimming in the same swimming pool as white kids. It would be a massive step backwards to go down that pathway and open up a whole can of worms that we closed a long time ago. I support reasonable protections in terms of religious freedoms, particularly for ministers of religion who want to perform or don't want to perform the ceremonies. I think that's fair and reasonable. But to go down that pathway, I think, would be a really backward step, and I won't be supporting it personally.
Claire O'Neill, do you think it'll happen?
I don't, and I voted yes. I think Darren voted yes. The majority of Australians voted yes because we want to live in a country with less discrimination, not more, and the opportunistic attempts to use this vote to increase discrimination in Australia should be knocked on the head straight away, and I'm really glad to see just Darren's clear statement on that. There are some people in the Coalition Party room who are going to be playing funny buggers with this, and we have to be really strong and really resolute, and Malcolm Turnbull needs to be strong and resolute to say that this was about whether same-sex couples should be able to get married. That's what we're going to legislate, and that should be it.
Kevin Andrews, who I mentioned before, who was a minister with Tony Abbott, he was on Sky today. You'll hear David Spears asking him whether or not he thinks because the baker shouldn't have to make a cake for the gay wedding, a Jewish baker shouldn't have to make a cake for a Muslim wedding. And Kevin Andrews thinks that's a good idea. Have a listen.
This goes to fundamental religious beliefs and beliefs of conscience, and it's only in relation to that.
So if an Islamic baker, in a part of southwest Sydney, an Islamic baker, and a Muslim customer comes in and they were marrying someone from another faith, and the Islamic baker said no.
Fine, I don't have a problem with that. Don't have a problem at all.
You got a problem with that, Darren Chester?
Yes.
That falls into the crazy category?
They're your words. I'm going to plead my mother's amendment here. If you can't say something nice about someone, don't say anything at all. Okay. I have nothing further to add to that comment.
Claire, anything to add?
Oh, I think his statement, it actually sickens me. I actually genuinely feel sick just hearing him articulate something that is so retrograde and so completely contrary to what Australians voted for. I'm just shocked, and Malcolm Turnbull has to come in and be clear that that is unacceptable, and it is completely contrary to the foundation values of this country. I just can't believe that a federal member of parliament would say that on national television.
1300 222 774 is the phone number. Big High Court decision today, which I think is going to have some ongoing implications. So we'll get into that in a tick. Some traffic first with Simon Tackler. Hi, Simon.
On the Tulla, first up, there's a left-hand lane blocked outbound due to a smash after Brunswick Road, and we're seeing delays right up to the airport. In the CBD on Kingsway, there's a left lane partially blocked due to a broken-down car near the Casino Tunnel. On Eastlink, a smash is being cleared near Ferntree Gully Road. We're seeing delays starting to ease both ways now. On the Monash, slowing inbound approaching the Domain Tunnel following an incident there. On the Westgate, heavy outbound at the Ring Road, then down to Corrick Creek Road. Inbound, it's on the brakes from Williamstown Road right to the Burnley Tunnel. On the trains, we're seeing a good run across the board, still some minor delays for the Craigieburn line. If you see anything, please text us on 0437 774 774. That's the latest on Melbourne's traffic.
You're with Raf.
More of your calls in a moment. A reminder, Christine Forster, Tony Abbott's sister, will be joining us after the 5 o'clock news. And Matt Canavan will be joining us as well, the Resources Minister. He's very keen for some tougher protections for what I'll call conscientious objectors. Can I ask you both as High Court scholars, Claire O'Neill and Darren Chester, Holly Hughes, I need to explain this situation. Fiona Nash, who was Deputy Leader of the Nationals, was kicked out, citizenship issue. Holly Hughes was next on the ticket. She did not have a government job at the time of the election. She was appointed to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal after the election, but it's a federal job. You can't be getting money from the Crown. She resigned from that position 45 minutes after Fiona Nash learnt of her fate in the High Court. The High Court have said that she, Holly Hughes, can't sit as a senator, so someone else is going to have to take that job. Darren Chester, I'll start with you. The High Court's being really hardcore on their interpretation, or I guess black letter law interpretation of the Constitution. That means there are going to be more politicians getting kicked out of Parliament because of connections to federal money, doesn't it?
Well, you're right, Raf. The black letter law interpretation by the High Court is obvious to everyone now. I think we've got a process going forward on the citizenship issue, and I think the decisions by the Prime Minister and the Opposition Leader to allow for that open and transparent process in the House of Reps and the Senate, where members, just like we have to record our register of interests, any properties we own or any shares we might have had, have got to be registered and openly available to the public. We'll be expected to declare our residency status and explain our citizenship, where our mum and dad were born and grandparents. So I think that's a good process. This issue of office of profit under the Crown, I think it's going to be a difficult one when you see the application to the Holly Hughes situation. As I understand it, and the way you described it, so I understand it as well, I'm not sure what else the lady in question could have done to make sure she was eligible. And it's going to, I think, perhaps have ramifications for others.
And you've got a lower house member, David Gillespie. I think, he owns a building, he leases it out to the tenant, and the tenant subleases to Australia Post, and Labor's taken him to court.
That about sums it. That's David's situation.
That might mean that he gets kicked out of the lower house.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on what that actually means, but David, you're right, he owns a commercial premises in his electorate. David was a former doctor. He obviously he did well as a specialist in gastroenterology, and he invested in some local property. That property is a commercial business. The woman who leased it from David then went on to become a licensed post office, and there's a motion or an action before the High Court seeking to strike David as a result. And I think the Australian people trying to follow this, they would be staggered that that could end up putting someone in trouble. Given that David has fully declared his interest in the property 4 years, it's not like anyone didn't know about it. He's had that business on his register of interest for as long as he's been a member of Parliament. And it's the same with some of the nationality issues, that dual citizenship issue. In some cases, people have fallen foul because of laws changing in another country, and that is, again, very difficult for members to necessarily be aware of.
What do you make of it all, Claire?
Well, I hear what Darren's saying, but the law is the law, and we can't expect members of the public to abide by the laws that we legislate for and then have a situation where politicians are not complying by the law. And whether we like it or not, the result is that Barnaby Joyce was breaking the law and Holly Hughes was, not legally eligible to run for Parliament in the way that she did.
There are two Labor
MPs
who might be
and I say that because those have been the examples that have come up most recently. The unfortunate thing for us as parliamentarians, and I assume we share a united goal that the Parliament actually work, but for Australians too, is that this citizenship fiasco is going to go on and on and on. I don't think this is going to get resolved until probably March or April next year. So all of your callers who are ringing in, Raf, telling you to talk about something else,
it's going to go on that long, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because we've got to have High Court decisions. We're going to have the disclosure process, High Court decisions, then by-elections. So we are still going to be back here, probably, Darren, talking about this next year in March, April.
So at the least, we're probably looking at a Super Saturday in March of a series of by-elections, perhaps. It's possible, isn't it?
Well, it's possible. I mean, my guess, Raf, is I think there will be some more self-referrals to the High Court. And there may well be some additional resignations if people have done their homework and realise that they've got citizenship by descent. The point you make, Claire, in relation to a couple of your colleagues, the point of their nomination, whether they're renouncing their citizenship had gone through, the High Court's application of such a black-letter version of the law may well be something that they'll have some questions have to answer on. I'm completely out of my depth when it comes to speculating on High Court rulings.
Oh, come on. Okay, the showstopper by-election still, I reckon, Christina Keneally, former New South Wales Premier, who actually at the moment lives closer to the seat of Bennelong than John Alexander, because I think he shifted to Bondi a few years ago. But either way, they're both stellar candidates, really, and John Alexander's, clearly a pretty good local member, and I think he's recognised as having done pretty good work in the Parliament. Claire, can Christina Keneally win a seat? I think he's got close to a 10% margin. Can she actually win the seat?
Look, she's the underdog. There's absolutely no question about that. A 10% margin is huge. John Alexander is a great tennis player. I can be confident of that. But I reckon Christina Keneally would make a brilliant member for Bennelong, and I'm really excited that she's been selected as the candidate.
Can she win?
That's up to the people of Bennelong. But as I say, a 10% is a huge margin. So she is the underdog, but I think if anyone can take that seat from the Liberals, especially at a moment like this where the country feels that it is, without the leadership we wanted and expected from Malcolm Turnbull, I reckon, if anyone can take it, this is the moment and she is the woman, but, she's very much the underdog.
What do you reckon, Darren?
I think John's got a tough fight in his hands.
Got 10-point margin.
Oh, look, I think margins these days, I've been involved in campaigns where seats have turned on 20% margins, so the margin's really irrelevant in a by-election. I think Christina Keneally is a formidable candidate in the sense she's been a former Premier of New South Wales, but taking that forward as well, she brings a fair bit of baggage from that role as a former Premier of New South Wales, from the behaviour of some of her colleagues around her. So she has a high profile. She has some kudos of having been a Premier, but she's also got the baggage of that most corrupt time perhaps in recent New South Wales history around some of her colleagues who ended up spending time behind bars. Now, that makes it harder for her, but at the same time, she's a strong candidate. John Alexander, on the other hand, has built his profile and built his margin in that seat through sheer hard work, and I think he's a terrific local member, and I hope he goes very well, and I'll certainly be actively supporting John.
Just before you finish, just on the point about Christina, important to note that she actually came in and cleaned up the New South Wales government.
Sure.
No one's expecting...
let's not re-prosecute.
Yeah, no, just want to mention that. Yep.
I'm happy. Look, she says her testimony was crucial in bringing down Ian McDonald and
That's right,
Eddie O'B, but we'll leave that to the voters of Bennelong. Thank you so much to both of you, Claire O'Neill and Darren Chester. Also, you're going to hear from the lawyer who kicked all of that off. He got Scott Ludlam voted out of Parliament. He voted for Scott Ludlam. It's crazy times. It really is. Let's get a quick weather forecast with Peter Blake. Hey, Peter.
Hello, Raf. We've got showers and storms over the north and eastern suburbs. We'll still see, likely to see some of those showers and storms moving over the Melbourne area tonight. Southerly wind has moved through the Melbourne area, got to 31.4 today. Tomorrow we'll see a minimum of 17, which is quite a bit less than yesterday, a maximum of 21. Still be some showers around and even a chance of a thunderstorm, probably more likely during from late morning onwards, and maybe picking up 3 to 10 millimetres around for tomorrow as well. Beyond that, Friday, maybe a possible shower around 16 to 23 and a possible afternoon shower Saturday 16 to 25, and then it's fine for Sunday, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday.
Coming up, Christine Forster, Tony Abbott's sister, will be joining us, Matt Canavan and Penny Wong, plus your call.